Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's live discussion on The Expanse Season 3, Episode 9, Transcendent. Oh, God, I can't pronounce this. Do you know the name of the episode? I just don't have it in front of me.
Intransigence.
Intransigence. Thank you. Thank you there. And yeah, so I'm actually, this is the first time because I do a review on each episode of The Expanse every week. And for this week, I actually don't have my review out yet. I usually like to have the review before I do the live discussion, but I've just been bit busy and not feeling too well this week, so I'm still working on my review, so I'll give my thoughts for the first time here in this live discussion. Anyway, I'm joined by a special guest, Akton Tamko. Thank you so much for joining. It's been a couple of weeks.
Yeah, it has been a couple of weeks, and I'm very disappointed in you, Mark, for not getting your review out, because I like to get an idea of what your thoughts are beforehand, but you don't get that from me, so it's fair.
Cool. And also joining us once again, Darren from Deeds Reviews. Thank you so much for joining.
Oh, always a blast to be here, Mark. Always appreciate you having me in on this. Quite a week. It's really excited. It's one of those episodes where as soon as it ends, I'm just really disappointed I can't put another one on. So yeah, it's been jumping around in my brain. So I'm very excited to get to dive in to hear what you thought of this, since your reviews it out yet, and what Akton felt on all this. So I'm excited.
Cool. Well, let's go ahead and jump in. But first, actually, Akton, since you haven't been here for the last couple of weeks, I want to get your thoughts on the shift. What do you think about the shift in story? Because last time we talked was episode 6, which we said was kind of like a finale, and it almost feels like this is like a totally different season. I mean, well, we know intellectually is because they're covering a different book. But even when I read that third book, even though I knew it was a new book, it was the start of a new story, it did feel jarring to me, like they're totally changing the format and the focus. So I want to get your quick thoughts on that and how you feel about this whole new setup.
Well, actually, I'm glad you brought that up, Mark, because I was going to talk about this either way. I found it extremely jarring. I'm going to be upfront about that. It would have been different if this was a different season, and I hope they can figure out a way to kind of catch up and like make it so they're not switching books in the middle of the season. And I found it much less jarring for whatever reason last season when they switched books in the middle of the season. This season, it's like this should have been a new season. Like all of a sudden, Prax is gone, Bobby Draper is gone, Aversorella is relegated to a background character. We throw in all these brand new characters that, as a non-book reader, I do not care about. It's just weird for it to happen in the middle of the season. And this Melba character, I didn't even know her name until I watched your review. And I didn't find any reason to care about her until this week. We finally get the reveal of who she really is. And then I became more interested in her. But the last couple of weeks, I'm like, why should I care about this character who appears out of nowhere in the middle of the season? It was really, the whole thing threw me off. And it's taking me, I think, until this episode to really start getting actually, I would say the end of last week's episode, which I didn't get to talk about with you guys, was really exciting. That's when it probably started. I'm starting to get my footing a little bit now, but it's taking a little while. And I don't know. We'll see how it goes. I don't know if I'm going to feel as highly about the rest of the season as I did the first half of the season. The first half of the season, I was just invested, really into it. And we'll see how it ends up. We got, 5 more episodes left, I believe. Is it 4 more episodes?
4 more, yeah.
Yeah,
4 more episodes. Yeah.
4 more. We'll see how it goes. It seems doubtful that I'm going to be into it as much as I was in the first half of the season. It just I'm just completely thrown off and trying to get back into it again. And I'm not saying this is bad. I am getting into it. It's happening. I would say the end of last week's episode and then into this week's episode, I'm starting to feel the groove, but it's still really strange to like Prax being gone and all of a sudden Bobby Draper all of a sudden gone and Aversorella we barely see. It's really strange for me, and I'm still getting used to it. So yeah, the shift, it was very jarring. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear that perspective because I talked to Darren and Don about this already, and it seems less sort of to find it a bit less jarring. And for Don, that makes sense because he just binged the whole show a couple like in the past month, so it's all sort of new to him. But that is interesting perspective to hear. And when you talked about the changeover between book 1 and 2 that happened last season 2, that books 1 and 2 were a lot more similar, and the differences were actually downplayed in the show, so the show was able to just flow into them a lot easier. And that's what being a book reader and know what book 3 was coming, I was really like questioning how they were going to try to flow into book 3, which into my mind, when I first read this, I'm like, wow, this is totally different. This is a totally different thing than books 1 and 2, which were a lot more similar. But they actually made less of an effort than I thought they would of flowing from book 2 to 3 and having like a huge time jump. And then just like they skipped over a lot of the setup that was in the novels as well. So to me, that felt even more jarring. Like Monica Stewart, for example, we got the time to know why the Rocinante hired her and why they were being sued by Mars and all this. Whereas in the show, it's just all of a sudden she's there immediately on the ship and you just say a backstory. Oh, Mars is suing, blah, blah. So I actually found that jarring, even though I knew what was coming.
Yeah, and the time jump too was you mentioned the time jump. That was another thing, like a big time jump like that in the middle of the season. It was weird. And so yeah, I was definitely thrown off by it, but I'm starting to get my footing now.
Well, I think that was probably one of the things that worked so well with the transition between book 1 and book 2 is because time-wise we weren't really the difference wasn't large enough. I mean, this is 9 months, a year or so. I mean, roughly between the last instance that we saw, and everybody else is in a different place. So, and I wonder, while I did like the opening bit for Avasarala in the episode when we did our little jump, was at 6-7. It might have been better. Maybe it was just how it was done. Perhaps using Monica and doing kind of a catch-up of why she's on the ship and what has happened in between. Not like, serving in a way as kind of a narrator, as almost like a news program. This is what's happened. So-and-so there. The war is over. That might have eased us into things more, but I think because, they did sort of drop stuff in. As I said, it did work for me because I was willing to make the jump, and I saw how the other storyline really didn't have anywhere else to go. But yeah, I think maybe the way they just worked that transition could have been a little smoother.
Yeah. And he talks about in season 2, the interchange between books 1 and 2 and how there wasn't a time jump. There actually was in the novels. In the novels, book 2 takes place a year after book 1, but in the show they eliminated that time jump and just jumped straight into it. And I think it worked, and because of the stories the way they were able to make that work. But I kind of expected them to try to do something similar because there was a year time jump between books 2 and 3 in the novels. But there's some things like you need the time jump for, like you need to have this ring set up, this new dynamic. And one of the main things in my mind is getting more into this episode is the whole Clarissa Mal storyline, because she needs to have time to like have her father be in prison to set things in motion to set up this huge plan. Melba Coe has her, we've known by her alias. I can now say her official name, Clarissa Mal. Anyway, so there were some things where I see they needed to do the time jump for this time, but I think it could have been smoother, like you were saying, like the newscast, or just taking more time to sort of enter. And they seem to actually be rushing through book 3. Like they're almost halfway through in just like 3 or 4 episodes, which is a lot faster paced than they tend to go.
Well, okay. Do you think then they're going to try and burn through book 3 by the end of this season?
That's speculation. That's something that I've been talking about with other people who read the novels. I think, personally, my opinion, I think it's possible. And personally, my opinion, if they do, I think a lot will be lost. I think I wouldn't appreciate it as much. I think if book 3 would seem a bit rushed. But on the other hand, not to give, well, maybe I shouldn't give it away because it's a good bit spoilerly, so I'll stop there. But yeah, I think it's possible, but I hope that they don't.
Yeah, and I don't know. I almost would have preferred it if they said, okay, this season we're doing a 7-episode season. And I know it's all messed up because Sci-Fi canceled it and they had to be picked up by Amazon. But if they had just planned, okay, we're doing a 7-episode season, end of season, and we'll make up. I would have preferred that, to have a shorter season that had a very clear ending, or 6-episode, I guess it would be. I mean, I would have preferred to shorten it. Just to transfer in the middle of a season like that is just it threw me off, and it's fine. I'm getting used to it now. But like, if I had a choice, I would say just do a short season now. Wait a year for the next one, because it just was weird to me. But yeah, I'll be interested to see if they do rush book 3. And I mean, on one hand, I would love for them to, fix this, and so that they're not doing this every year where they're switching books in the mid-year. But on the other hand, like even not having read the books, I would hate for them to rush the story. Even not having read the books, if they rush the story, I'll be able to tell. I'll be like, okay, they seem to be rushing through things here. So I don't want them to do that either. I hope that they take their time to tell the proper story, but at the same time, I would love for them to find a way to fix this issue of we're going to switch to a whole different story in the middle of the season, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I'll try to word this carefully, not to give away any spoilers, but I will say that I actually think it would be better, even though I think book 3 would be rushed if they went through it this season. I think it would be, because the difference transition between book 3 and 4, I think they need that break in the season. If they did that transition in the middle of the season, I almost think it would be worse than this year. I think so. I'm actually in a way hoping that they do, even though I feel like a lot of the story will be lost. But I don't know. I know they're doing a big double episode for the finale, so maybe, I don't know, maybe not.
Yeah, and I just have to point out in the chat, Iron Throne saying Ford to Melba. Hello, Clarice Mal. Ford doing, he's doing a crossover of a different show. Okay.
Yeah, he mentions Juliet every week in the chat.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one thing is having known nothing about the books, I wouldn't know what would be lost. But I don't know, the way I kind of have trust just in how they're going to handle it, whatever the plan is, because the producers, I think, have worked and figured out a really good pace to keep story going and yet, maintain a lot of the original feel. So if there's something big, maybe that's where they're ending it on, and they'll do, wrap it up. Again, I don't know enough about the books to know what may or may not be lost. So they have my attention, at least.
Well, that's true. And it's like we get back to episode 6, what everyone loved, you guys loved. I was a bit being the snooty book reader, being, we lost this in the book. So it could be that it actually, what they do works for the show. And people who are not aware of the books will still work for them. It's only us people, snooty people who read the books be like, oh, you forgot this, you left this part out, blah, blah, blah. But as long as it works for the show, then that's actually all good in the end.
Yeah, adaptations are always tough. It's picking and choosing.
But you're saying, like, Atkins, that this part of the story is starting to work for you now, like it was jarring at
first. Yeah, it's took me 3 episodes to get into it. Really, the end of the last episode, I was like, okay, this is exciting. I'm hooked. Like, they're going into the ring, and like I'm starting to get into it. And this episode, I was really starting to pick up. I'm not as high on it as I was in the first half of the season yet, but I'm interested. I'm engaged. I'm enjoying it. I'm not going to say this is the best show on TV. I know you like to say that a lot. To me, it's not. Oh, right. But
I still think it is.
I'm interested. I'm engaged. Yeah, it threw me off. So but I am starting to get my footing now. Yes, I'm starting to get into it, and I'm hopeful. We got 4 episodes. That by the end of it, I'll be like, yes, totally on board with this story. Yes. So we'll see how they do it.
Yeah, and the other thing I was going to mention is, like you mentioned earlier, like maybe they could have done a shorter season. I kind of think maybe part of the reason they're moving at this fast pace now is because when they filmed this and produced the season, they were unsure about how if they were going to get another season, which their fears appeared to be somewhat justified, but it turns out. So I wonder if next season, now that they have a more stable relationship with Amazon, if they'll do more long-term thinking. Perhaps part of the reason why they crammed a lot into this season. And when they thought the show was going to be canceled, the showrunner did make a statement saying that the show wouldn't end on a cliffhanger, and that it would be a good stopping point, that if this was going to be the final season.
Yeah, well, that would, I mean, that's at least good to know. I mean, and I would imagine that they were trying to boost everything up to try and really grab any additional audience that they could, but not leave people hanging. I always appreciate a show that at least can kind of plan ahead and see, you know, you always want us coming back for more, but I hate it when they leave us like right in the middle of something super important, and then that's all that you ever see to it. So I'm stoked that they're not going to leave us in that bit. But yeah, I think like I said, I have a lot of trust in the way that they've worked the pacing of this show. So just whether they end in some part in the middle of book 3 or they just kind of rush through it, they may take some of the elements and push that into 4 too. Again, not knowing the books, I'm not really sure what they perchance could move and twist around. But they're really good at working with their audience. I mean, they're really acknowledging their fans. So I'm with the show wherever it's going.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, the statements that the showrunner said is another thing that makes me think they're going to get to the end of book 3 by the end of the season. But we'll see. We'll see how we go. But anyway, let's go ahead and jump into this episode. Let's get into this episode, and I want to start with the Melba storyline, the Clarissa Mal storyline, because in this episode we finally get her backstory. I can finally, like, the whole time I've been having to keep like a poker face and hide that I knew who this person was. It's also interesting because in the novels they didn't withhold who she was. Like her very first appearance, they told you right away that she was Clarissa Mal. So it's interesting that the show decided to keep that information hidden to sort of make it sort of a big reveal. And I'm two minds of this, and I'll be curious to see what you guys think of it, because on the one hand, I do think it does make it a bit more sort of shocking, more interesting, like, oh, now it's a big revelation. But on the other hand, maybe that would have made her interesting to begin with. Getting back to your point, Atkins, that you didn't find her that interesting until you find out who she was. So maybe they revealed that from the get-go right away, you'd be interested in what she's up to.
Yeah, I honestly wish they had revealed this from the get-go like the books did, because I did not find myself invested in this character. I was like, I mean, I was curious, who is she? I know they didn't put her in there for the pure hell of it. Like, there was some reason why we were spending all this time with this character. And why does she hate Holden so much? And it was like, I don't know. I feel like I would have been more into the character if they had just told you outright who she was. I mean, I kind of can see the other side of it too, why they would withhold that. But in retrospect, I think I would have preferred to know up front, like apparently they did in the books. But I don't know. That's just me.
Darren, your thoughts on this?
Actually, I'm fine with the way that they put the information out there, that we saw what she's doing. We're wondering why she is, and then they sort of throw out the backstory and all this. So, I mean, from just a story development, I was fine with that. I know a lot of people were very excited about Melba, Clarissa, her storyline, her character. Certainly a lot of talk we had last week of, oh, as soon as you hear her backstory, she's going to be so amazing, going to be so excited. I oddly found her less intriguing, finding out her backstory. I mean, again, it's good to find this out, but seeing that her motivation is just kind of like basic revenge, against Holden, who didn't, I mean, he cut the dad, but dad was doing a lot of stuff on their own. And she just seems to be like, Julie was always treated better than me, and I was always looked down upon, and now Julie's dead. I can do something for my dad. It's good. It's a good character to have in there. I'm not putting that down, but it's certainly I'm looking at going, oh, so it's just you felt put out, and now you want revenge against the person that you felt put your dad out. Okay.
Like, this is something I actually thought the show did better in the books, because we didn't get these specific flashback scenes. And I can't help, again, we talked about the Lost comparisons. I can't help but think like the whole way the flashbacks were done felt really much like a episode of Lost. Like, they even use that swooshing noise.
They did use a swooshing noise. I was like, they can't do that. Doesn't Lost have a copyright on that?
Like, it's Marvin Candle. We're finding out his backstory, how he joined the Durham Initiative. I don't know, but I did find this really interesting. I actually think it sets up a really interesting dynamic with her. It shows that she's kind of how clueless she is, and that because she was always in the shadow of her sister. Like, even when her sister was being a total dick to their dad, he still liked her better, which really shows what a shitty dad he is. But it shows sort of how sort of messed up she is mentally, is that she always thought of, that she needs to, her whole goal in life was to, live up to her father's aspirations, to get out of her sister's shadow. And even after her death, I think she still has that feeling. So I think, to me, it explains her motivations. And it's not just to get revenge, but it's also to prove to her father that she is the better sister. And I think these flashbacks in particular help flesh that out. And also, I really like seeing Julie Mao and that actress again. We haven't seen her a lot for a while. So it's good that we got Miller, of course, in the previous episodes, but it was good to actually see her again in the flashbacks as well. And it also shows that she was actually kind of onto it, that she knew what a despicable man their father was, but it's something that Clarissa is apparently extremely clueless to.
Yeah.
Well, it was also interesting. Oh yeah, go ahead, Akton.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, and I have no respect for the character of Clarissa, that she's just so blinded by her dad, and definitely I relate a lot more to Julie. Yet at the same time, I don't dislike the character as a character in the story. I am interested. I am engaged. And like I said, I probably would have been more engaged with her if I had known her backstory from the get-go. But now that we do have her backstory, I am interested in this. I am interested in the fact that Julie Mao held this other sister that I didn't know about. I don't know if it was ever mentioned before, but it's certainly news to me. But it is interesting to me that we have this different kind of Mal sister, somebody who is like had the wool pulled over her eyes by her dad, and I can, not respect the character and not like the character as a character, but at the same time, interested in her story.
Oh yeah, just real quick, I did want to mention that earlier in the season she was name dropped because I knew she was coming. I was particularly noticed that when Aaron Wright and all were talking about like you were keeping down Mal's family, I think they name dropped Clarissa. I was like, they're setting up for her.
Well, yeah, but I think Acton put on an interesting point that about the differences between the two characters, because especially in those flashback scenes, the interesting thing about Clarissa Melba is she is almost the polar opposite of her sister. Even in the motivations, I mean, Julie is kind of like a lot of the inspiration for the journey of the Rocinante, and Miller especially, and that whole storyline was so very important and so very central. And Julie was out there to try and help the belt. She is pushing away from her father's influence, recognizing what he's doing, and trying to be selfless in many ways in her response. Whereas we have Clarissa's response to the whole thing is the exact opposite. She's latching onto her dad. She is blinded by what he can do. She is just searching for his personal approval and is willing to frame the belt and go after the people that she felt wronged her family without any, looks like, thought of consequences, certainly for the belt and those associations. but possibly even her own life at a point. She seems quite obsessed to the point where she might even sacrifice herself. But Belinda in the chat brought up an interesting point about long games and payoffs. And with Clarissa being blind to it, perhaps her journey is going to be one of seeing the truth and seeing where Julie was come from, and that Holden and everybody was doing a proper thing. And this would be a very interesting arc for her character. And I would be excited to see that. I certainly trust that this is not just going to be some blind flash in the pants, villain of the week. There are some plans for this character. So while her base story may be a little tropish, I am curious to see where her arc and where her story is going to lead.
So I would actually already, to me, like even just leaving aside what I know about the books and just what I've seen in the show, to me, I'd already say, like with this episode, with those flashbacks, that they already established her as a sort of dynamic villain. She doesn't come across as mustache twirling, that you understand there's a lot more behind her motivations than simply, I'm going to get revenge. And there's a whole sort of twisted, sort of fucked up background with the way she was raised, which kind of makes sense considering how screwed up Jules Pierre Mao is.
Oh yeah, no, I don't want to by any means say how denigrate how messed up Mao is. As a parent, just totally awful. Even for the one who was trying to work and be honest, it's like, if you like me, I hate you. If you hate me, I like you. I mean, Mao's just no. As a parental figure, what she's had to deal with and grow up with, definitely is on the suck point, which is why I'm hoping that there is going to be an interesting arc for her character. I love redemption arcs.
Have they mentioned their mom much? Has that ever, come up? I don't.
Not
I'm
really.
Yeah. I'm curious to see like what the mom is like in this family, because
I think they mentioned her existence in the show, but that's about it.
Like, is she still alive, or they?
Pretty sure they said that she was still alive.
I don't know. I'm just curious. Anyway,
she, to my recollection, she is in the books, but I think it's the same thing in the show as well. But she's never really factors in the books either. So I think just kind of just focusing more on the character we already know. Cool. So, wondering if there's any other thoughts on sort of Calista Melba storyline before we move on. Maybe her interactions with her fellow sort of electricians. So one thing I actually did think was really cool was when I think his name is Stanley, when he was talking about, when he was watching the recording, the fake recording, of course, of Holden. He was like, blah blah blah, this guy sucks, and you could see how Melba was like smiling, and she was like, oh, it makes you wonder what else he was lying about. He's like, yeah, and she was like, oh, like into it, but then the other person's like, well, we'll find out when the Martians catch up to him. It's just like, so to me, that was like her sort of notice where she made the decision that she was definitely going to stay on the ship to go through the ring, because she needed to see this through to make sure that Holden was killed. And this is the other thing, and I don't think this is spoiling anything, even though it explained a lot more in the books. It can be inferred in the show as well, is that her motivation isn't just simply to kill Holden, but to discredit him. Because to kill him, he would die a martyr, which is not good enough, that she needs to discredit him first.
Yeah, I definitely picked up on that. Yeah, I definitely think she wants to not simply kill him, but to tarnish his name, to make other people like hate him as much as she does. I definitely got that vibe too.
Yeah, I definitely see it's getting rid of the heroic vision of what Holden was, and of course, obviously, the worse that he looks, the better her father in comparison seems. There was one interesting bit that I had when she was leaving the little note, the little verbal message inside of Ren's case there for the family, which I thought was an odd way of transferring a message. Like, you don't know me, I loved your dad, but I need you to contact my dad and tell him this. That was kind of odd. But she said she said something interesting about her father. Concerns, all of your concerns about the proto-molecule are as bad, if not worse. Something along those lines, which I did find interesting, because all that I was thinking is like, what concerns? He was part of the development of it. So I'm really curious, maybe what is the story that Mao has told his daughter, was how much of the truth, how much of the lie has she really been exposed to? Because it struck me strongly as like, wow, Mao warning about the proto-molecule, that doesn't seem to really ring. I mean, outside of that brief moment when he was afraid that maybe it's too dangerous, but that lasted what, like a day and a half, couple of hours, until he was like, no, keep going after the kid, we need to find out more. So that was the one little bit that I found really kind of interesting. But did you guys catch that, or what do you think?
I do think, and I talked about this before, I think Mal convinced himself and probably convinced Clarissa as well. Like, in his mind, he was doing the right thing. He was always, and that makes the best villains the heroes of his own stories. That even though he was doing it just to turn a profit, in his mind, he was doing it for the betterment of human advancement. We'll use this cool new technology to make these huge, new weapons to advance, and you can use this to upon search the stars. That's what the people of Persian were saying. We're going to use this to, adjust humans so they can go on long term. So he was thinking himself as a visionary, like he was awesome and he was doing the right thing for humanity the whole time. And particularly towards the end, he was concerned about the proto-molecule on Venus, which is why he was doing the nasty shit to the children, what he did to Justified. So I think that was his twisted vision of it, and that Clarissa completely bought into that. So that's what I took from that.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I mean, I had the same kind of or similar kind of reaction to you, Darren. It was like, his concern. But I kind of was thinking along the same lines as what you just spelled out, Mark. That in his mind, that he's doing the right thing and whatever, and he's clearly, his daughter has clearly been drinking his Kool-Aid forever. Like, she just believes everything that he says or that he believes, and was, mad at Julie for daring to defy him, even though Julie was clearly in the right. Yeah, so that makes a lot of sense to me. I can definitely go along with that.
Hey, the quest for a father's approval can make you blind to a lot of things. So that's her weak point. I think she wants dad to love her and thinks this is what's going to help her help accomplish that.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just trying to look something up because I heard this somewhere and I couldn't remember if this is exactly the case. But one of her workmates is Stanny and another one is Ren. And I heard, like, in the books, the third one was actually Bob. So do you get the homage there? Robert, Stanny, and Ren. House Baratheon.
Okay, all right. Sorry, that took me a moment. But I get where you're going with that.
Wait, okay. Who's Ren in House Baratheon?
Renly.
Oh, Renly. Oh,
yeah. Renly, Stannis, and Robert.
Oh, no, I never would have come up with that in a million years.
That's what I heard somewhere. I can't remember if that's true, but yeah, and it kind of makes sense because the authors of the Expanse novels are friends with George R.R. Martin and sort of worked with him in the past or are inspired by them. But they keep insisting that he had nothing to do with writing the novels, which I believe. But it does make sense that they would write in a little homage, which is pretty cool.
That is a nerd deep dive. I have respect.
Absolutely. Cool. So yeah, if there's nothing else on Clarissa, we can go ahead and move on. Let's talk about the Rosinante and their big storyline this week. So it was pretty interesting with Holden because, like, you had the whole thing with Miller where he was going insane last week and trying to get information out of Miller. And this week, Miller just disappears. And so he locks himself in the room and just like, Miller! And he's just not appearing. We get the funny little scene where Alex is coming down to check on him. And it's like, so there's no Miller yet? And he just slams the door on him. And then finally, when he's given up on Miller, and he's like, okay, let's slow down and let the Martians catch us because we're out of options. Then Miller finally decides to show up, and this time Miller's a lot more coherent. And he says, like, specifically, oh, it's because there's a better signal in here. And he like last episode, it sounded like he was just caught in the loop and was just repeating the story, where this, he seemed a lot more sort of was able to converse more with Holden, even though he was still using the crime metaphors. He seemed more sort of coherent. So what do you guys take on this storyline?
Well, I really liked how he was using the crime metaphors, and Holden's like, knock it off with the crime metaphors. He was like, oh, so you want me to talk about the blah, 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 the proto is using all these complicated words, and Holden's like, okay, fine, crime metaphors. Whatever word. I really enjoyed that. And yeah, and I for one was happy to see Holden, or rather Miller, being a little more coherent. I don't know that I would have liked it if it worked last week, but if they would continue doing that for the rest of the season, him talking in that way, I think it would have driven me crazy. So I actually really like this quite a lot, actually.
Yeah, I've got to agree with Acton there. I love that this was a transition. I loved how they explained it. Yeah, the transmission, it's not clear. It's better. It's better. You know, you still got a little bit of that. This is almost a construct, but it's a more accurate construct of Miller. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. And yes, I have to say that scene there was a couple of really kind of like laugh out loud moments for me in this episode. And that was one of them, especially because of Holden just holding that complete blank face, not saying anything. It's like the door opens, chat, and then just closes right back. That was, to me, a beautifully constructed scene.
Yeah, absolutely. I also like how when Miller does appear, he's just like, come on, what are you doing? Let's go. Come on, why are you slowing down? Let's get there. And that sort of attitude. And he seems a lot more like the Miller that we're familiar with from the first couple of seasons.
Well, yeah, and I think that's why it worked. Before it was kind of the flashback. Yeah, he's stuck. He's not sure. Now you get a lot more of the character. It's a lot more intriguing. I mean, like Acton had said, if it had just continued the old version, it would have started to have gotten annoying. But now, again, the trustworthiness is interesting because it's like we got to go, and the next thing that we see is Holden taking off outside. There's a lot of trust. I have to say, Holden has quickly put a lot of trust in this Miller construct. I mean, not a lot of options, but certainly he's willingly jumped down the rabbit hole pretty well there.
To be fair, following Miller's instructions, or what Miller was hinting at last week about going slower and getting into the ring when everyone else thought he was crazy. Like, what, you want to go into the ring? Are you insane? It saved them. I mean, at least temporarily, they're still in a bit of a bind, but I mean, they could have been just blown up right there. So I think the Miller construct, whatever you want to call it, the investigator, I think you called it, Mark.
Yeah.
Good.
That's what whatever. On the cast list, the investigator.
The investigator.
Yeah.
I think that he's earned Holden's trust a little bit because he was right about going slowly into the ring. That at least bought them some time. They could be very much blown into bits already. So I can kind of see why Holden's like, I mean, what else does he have? Like, that's all. That's the only thing he has is this, what Miller's telling him, and it's worked so far. So why not, go out on a limb and let's put on a spacesuit and go out in space and we'll see. I don't know what that's all about yet, but
that is true. He has earned that trust. For sure. For sure. He has already saved them. So no, you're quite right with that. But anyways, I just found interesting how quickly that became just the dependent line. But you're right. What other choice do they have? They're going at X miles an hour and they're running out of time quick.
Yeah, what I thought was interesting, and this is like maybe just speaks to the type of person Holden is, which I find a bit annoying at times, is that when Miller says, "Let's, come on, you need to go to the state, to the nucleus, the thing in the middle where everything is, you need to go there." Holden doesn't take the Rosinante there. He instead just jumps off and goes on his own. And I think that's more to do with him like saying, "Oh, I want to take on all the risk," and that's kind of attitude which I see in a lot of like hero characters a lot. That always irritates me. Instead of trusting your crewmates, you're like, "No, I'm gonna take this risk completely on my own."
Well, that was another, actually, I think kind of another theme that I think perpetuated this episode was the crew not telling any of the rest of the crew what they're doing.
Yeah.
Again, considering there's only 3 people here, I mean, I guess there's a lot of space. You could get around without being noticed a lot more. But yeah, there was no indication. I'm hoping he at least left a note, because when Alex and Amos start looking for their captain and they find out there's just a suit missing, that's not going to be really good for them. But then we also had the other bit with Amos and his discussion with the camera crew. He was making a lot of choices, and I did appreciate that Holden actually acknowledged that with Amos. Is like, no, I'm back in your play. I wish you maybe would have run it past me first.
Well, and is it Mark? Are we switching to this topic?
Yeah, sure. Let's go ahead and talk about that. Yeah, we can talk about that.
Yeah, because I thought it was funny when we're like, I thought it was funny that Alex was like, "Oh, make sure you tell them that we didn't do it." And I'm like, "Yeah, right. They're not gonna do that." But then later, when Holden is like, "Well, our only hope now is that they tell the Mars ship that we're okay," and Alex then was like, "Yeah, it's not gonna happen." And yeah. Amos was like, "What? I was gentle on them," or I forget his exact words, but he was like, "I was being really nice to them." But Alex at that point realized, yeah, they're not going to put in a good word for us. That's not happening.
Yeah, I mean, Holden kind of does. Yeah, he does say to Amos, like, I wish you would have run this by me first. But it's kind of his fault for sort of just isolating himself in the room and just letting Amos run. Because without him there, of course, it was. I mean, what he did with them was like so like typical Amos. And at first, I don't know, I was kind of disappointed, like in the scene where Amos grabbed Monica and put the screwdriver or whatever that was up to her throat and threatened Elio, and it's like, "You tell me how to fix this, or I'm going to kill her." And they kind of just cut away from that, which I wish that they would have stayed on it. And the next time we see him, he's throwing them in an airlock. So maybe I just wanted a bit more, but I think they're implying that was a bluff, which of course it was, that he was never going to kill her. He just wanted Elio to think that he was, because he wanted him. So I don't know what you guys think, but I actually believe Elio, that he was just given this thing from a source who we now know is Melba, and he thought it was just going to give them more information on the ship, but it was actually her way of tricking them into getting the situation. And I honestly don't think he knew anything about it, because if he did, then he would die too. And that's actually a good point that he brings up.
Yeah, and I believe that too. I don't see why he would have that motivation he doesn't have the same motivation that Melba has to want to get revenge and hold her. There was no reason he would want to do that. That his motivation was trying to get the story or whatever. Like he's, I think that makes a lot more sense. So I definitely believe him. That, I mean, he was basically used by Melba. He didn't really know what he was doing. I definitely believe that.
Yeah, I have been very suspicious of the cameraman, and we talked a lot about this last week. But his confession to me rang very true. I saw that. But I like Amos, so maybe I'm already predisposed to liking his choices. But yeah, they're very limited. Holden sort of locked himself away. I think Amos just wanted to get to the true answer. And he knows with his psychopathic kind of presentation that's people are going to be honest with him. obviously he wasn't going. It was a bluff. He wasn't going to kill anybody because nobody was really hurt. She wasn't dead. He must have believed him. Amos must have believed him with whatever his story is. So he has faith in his own interrogation. And when we think that he's trying to space him, it's really no, just a next plan. This is the only thing we can do. We got to toss you out to try and say. So I mean, there was a logic. There was thought to what he was going, and he wasn't being crazy. He was just, to me, I think, using his craziness to the best effect, or people's perception of his craziness.
Cool. So yeah, I also want to talk a bit about the we kind of glossed over like the whole inside the ring space and how we get to see it's like this huge sort of they describe it as a bubble, and when the Martians like are able to get in by going the same way the Rosinante got in, sort of just copying them, and they shoot a probe to find out that there's essentially a speed limit. So that's why like the torpedo and the Belto flew in there. That's why they were grabbed, because if you go too fast, the whatever in there, and the way Alex described it gets nervous and grabs you, will stop. So that they learn there's a speed limit, so there's a certain speed that they can go. So now what we have is like sort of it's like a funny, almost they do these comedies like a slow chase, like the ships are going like really slow and chasing each other, and so there's like a weird sort of little thing Miller calls a nucleus that's in the middle where everything is naturally just gravitating towards, and what they send probes to the outer edge of the bubbles, it sort of disappears, and all of this is in this weird protomolecule thingy that came out of Venus. So you have any thoughts or perhaps speculations on what this thing is and how cool or how you thought it was portrayed in this episode?
I thought that it's created a pocket dimension, which I loved. I mean, again, my initial thought is, of course, it's circular. I like Stargate. It must be a giant Stargate. You know, I'm pre-programmed to think along those lines. The fact that it's something else and it is this kind of like extra dimensional space, I thought was really cool, because there are other questions. I like the fact how, as soon as the Rossi went in, everybody else went in as well. I mean, that was a nice thing about everybody's like, well, the door's opened. This is where the true decisions are to be made, which I loved. I like the fact that the Martian ship was trying something. Shoot it fast. Okay, it's not doing well. Shoot it slow. Okay, this is working better. There's a speed limit. I mean, I liked all of the figuring out. Even the theory of if it reaches the edge, it winks out of existence. We don't know that. That's speculation. It may pop back into normal space elsewhere. But I think it's a reasonable cautionary approach. You don't know. You don't want to be sure. You want to be sure about these things. So I like how they've kind of investigated the whole sort of idea. And obviously, we've got this central structure, this nucleus, that seems to be, and that makes me want to think, well, is this a giant cell of some sort? Are they moving through the cytoplasm of some extra-dimensional creature? The nucleus is about to birth this other new thing. I mean, there's questions, but they gave us great structure around everybody can make their decisions from it, and I really love how they handled that.
Yeah, and I don't really have any. I don't know that I have any speculation as far as what I think this is, but I'm intrigued. I'm following along. I want to see where they're going with this. I want to know what exactly this is. And Mark, I have a question for you. Maybe you can clarify. With the ships outside of the ring, how do they perceive the ships that went in the ring? Are they still on the radar, or did they just disappear completely, or do they?
I think I think they kind of explained in this episode that they disappear, like they can't see them at all, and that's why. So the Martians, like that's why they sent a probe in to see what happened to the Rosinante when the probe went back and fed them what was inside. So then they went in, and then no one else, the UN or the Behemoth, no one then know what happened to the Martians until the Martians sent another ship, a smaller ship like a shuttle, but they call it a skiff. They sent that out of the ring and communicated with everyone. And they even mentioned like communications impossible within and without the ring. And they let everyone know what was happening inside the ring because no one else could see what was in.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I wasn't clear on that. So that's interesting. Yeah, I'm really curious to see what this thing is and where they're going with it. But I can't say that I like have any theories or anything like that.
Oh yeah, no, fair enough. That's a pretty good place to be. So anyway, yeah, let's go ahead and move on to the Behemoth storyline. I was in the chat talking earlier about the pounding of the chest and this inspirational speech of Barcelona. I actually love that scene. I thought it was great. I thought it was a great way to show that the whole belt is sort of the OPA. There's all united now. It used to be all these tiny bickering factions, and the fact that you got Ashford, who of course was from a rival section of drummers, totally supporting her, and he's the one who starts the tapping and then starts and supports her. I think it shows that he's trying to leave any antagonistic feelings he has for her or Johnson aside and focus together as a team.
Yeah, which is good. Yeah, I like that. I'm glad to see this. Are we? I mean, I guess you can't maybe say this without spoiling anything, and you may not know for sure, anyways, because they always deviate from the books. But I wonder if I've ever seen Anderson Dawes again. I like that character. But yeah, I do like that these different factions are working together. I also liked in that scene, it was interesting seeing Naomi's reaction. Like, she was not on board. She was not pounding her chest. She was not getting into it. So you could tell right then and there, like, oh, she's going back to the Rosinante. She's done with this. So I thought that was a very interesting scene too. The whole, I mean, the chanting thing and the whole like, oh, we are the bumpers, like, it was a tiny bit comical. I mean, it wasn't, but it wasn't too hokey. It was a little bit on the edge of like, oh, okay, a little silly, but I bought it. I was into it, and I was intrigued by Naomi's response and knowing that she's definitely leading away from these guys.
Yeah, I'll just answer your question real quick, which I can't answer, is because Dawes is a completely and utterly different character in the books than he is in the show. In fact, he barely appears in the books, and he's a total. So it's not even the same guy. So the answer to your question is I have no idea. Because the books are totally different in this regard. And the whole setup with having like two different factions, that's also different. It wasn't that way in the book. So there's a lot of things have changed about this storyline.
Interesting.
So anyway, Darren, your thoughts on this scene?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm seeing Ashford. I think Ashford believes in the belt. I think that's the one thing that's probably between him and Drummer what they might share really points of view is he wants a united belt. So I think whether or not he wants to be the captain ultimately or thinks he should be the captain, I think he understands it's in his best interest to unite the crew as much as he can. So I think as the second officer, he's doing exactly what he should. He's getting everyone going. He's uniting everyone behind the captain. I think he's doing a great job with this. I think there's a lot of honesty behind him. Again, whether or not where his ambition may or may not lie, I don't see that as overriding his commitment to the belt as a unified force. And if that's going to be under Drummer right now, I think that he is fine with that. I did really enjoy how much, I mean, again, with rising up with the belt there, how much they were so willing to just dive right into the ring. Well, everyone else, I mean, the Martians win it, of course, because they want the Rossi. I mean, their motivation is pretty clear, and I think Holden and them were right onto it. Is if they surrender to the Mars, they're going to lose the Rossi no matter what. They're never going to give that back. So we can understand their motivation, especially their anger with it being gone as well. The UN a bit more cautious, and I know we're going to talk about that later. How they're taking people off, whereas the belt's like, Oh, the door's open? Well, a belter opened the door. We're all diving right in, and the whole crew is just like right with it. So I love that energy behind, the belters. They are the ones that are going to cross it first. They're going to open the door. They're going to dive right in because that's their existence every day. And I love that kind of different, just showing that difference in each culture's sort of approach. Marston's in one ship, all of the belters go in. Again, it's not just the behemoth, all of the secondary ships, everybody went in with them. So
Yeah.
I love that bit.
Yeah, and the funny point is that the Martians came in and told everyone not to, don't bother coming in. We have this handle. And of course, what does everyone do? They come in, like the Bell comes in and the UN, they're coming in. They're like, nah, screw you. We're not letting you handle this. So that's fine. And it also shows, like, even though they're all allies now, is that there's still the underlining tension between all the three different factions, which I think really works. I also really quick wanted to answer a comment. I think I lost it here, but a comment I heard earlier, I think it was from Savage, who asked, how come Naomi all of a sudden has a Belter accent? And I think I might have addressed this before, but I think there's a couple of reasons. One, I think she's putting one on in order to fit in. And the other, of course, is being around Belters all the time might bring it out a bit more. But I think she's just trying to accentuate her Belter accent more to fit in.
No, I think it was totally just because she's around them again. It's coming out again. If you ever met people from the South who live up north for a while, they lose a lot of their Southern accent. They have a little hint of it, but it's not as profound. But then they go back home south again. It's like, I'm back south again, and their accent fully comes out again. And I've seen it happen in real life, so I didn't question it for a second. Like, to me, it was just she was with non-Belters for a while, so she adjusted. She was back with Belters again, and it came back out again, and that's totally actually normal in real life. So I didn't have any questions about that at all.
Yeah, especially she's been there for 9 months, a year. She's been there for a while, so it's not like she just got back and was just hanging out with the Belt. She's been around them for a while. So yeah, I'm right with you. I saw that it's just her going back to her natural accent because that's who she's around.
Well, I mean, I experience that myself whenever I visit the States. Start to bring out the American lingo and lose the New Zealand lingo a bit more. Sweet as, bro. But anyway, so Atkin, any sort of I kind of lost train of thought here what we're talking about. But yes, I know what I wanted to ask you, Atkin, about, because I hadn't had a chance to ask your opinion on Ashford. Yeah, what do you think of this character? Because you talked a bit about Melba and how you weren't really into him. What do you think about Ashford?
Yeah, he's all right. Lacking Anderson Dawes, it was a good representation of him. Like, we don't have that character, but we have this guy from that faction, and you don't know what to make of him at first, or like, should we trust this guy? I mean, is he up to no good? And then I trust him now. Like, I do believe that he's genuine. And maybe I could just be naive and I could just end up looking like a fool later on by this guy. But I think that he generally does want what's best for the Belt as a whole, and he really is willing to put aside these like previous little spars that they've had between the factions, and like, okay, that's in the past. We're all a united Belt now, and I like it. I think he's a very interesting character. I think he brings him and okay, I'm blanking on the captain. Yes, Drummer have a very good dynamic together, and him and Drummer and Naomi, all the three of them together, have a very good dynamic on screen. So yeah, I'm into this character. I like him.
And that's the other thing when we see Ashford like sort of talk to Naomi, and he tries to say, "Oh, I'm actually happy. I'm happy for you. I'm happy for them. I'm happy the Nate is still alive." And she's like, "Well, I don't believe you. I think you're full of shit." He's like, "No, I just had to do it. And it's funny when she brings up, she's like, "Oh, they were framed." He's like, "Yeah, sure, I believe you, but we still needed to destroy them." And she's like, "Oh, that almost makes it worse." But I can actually see his point of view, and I think I said this before: is I agree with his decision to push to attack the Rocinante, even if he knows they're innocent. It's kind of beside the point as far as the behemoth is concerned, because the behemoth was at risk of being destroyed by the UN, and so he took whatever steps he could to stop that.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's looking at the bigger picture. And I think that's what's very clear is, yeah, from a personal standpoint, I totally believe you. That would be great. From a bigger picture standpoint, this is now a united belt trying to work with the big fish. And this pops up. It's from just a pure diplomatic standpoint. It has to say guilty or innocent. There's only a couple of their lives and should be sacrificed in order to protect this new, government, this new force that we are creating. So yeah, I get that it's exactly what he had to do, and I also see how he wish he didn't have to, but that's his job as a military officer.
Cool. And it's also interesting because he gives her this pep talk about nostalgia. And it's like, don't want to go back to the Rocinante. You're just feeling nostalgia. It never works out. But it's funny because she actually flipped that and interpreted the nostalgia was her coming back to the OPA in the first place. And she even tells him, well, I left the OPA first before I left the Rocinante. And so she ends up taking off and leaving because she realized I'm just being nostalgic for coming back here was a mistake. My place is on the Rocinante. And that was actually a really nice scene. I like her interactions between Drummer, where Drummer's, she thought Drummer wouldn't let her leave, but she's like, you underestimated me, and just let her leave. And it just shows the respect that those two have for each other. So I thought that was a really touching scene myself.
Yeah, I did too. And it appeared to me that Ashford knew from that conversation that she was going back to the Rocinante, and that's why he had all the doors locked, and he told Drummer, "Well, I don't want there to be any deserters." He was specifically targeting Naomi. I mean, that was pretty clear that he didn't want her to leave, but Drummer was like, "You know what? Go." And I did really like that scene too.
Yeah, I thought that was beautifully done. Again, there's a little bit of sadness that maybe was there a little trust loss between Naomi and Drummer there. They seem to have a strong connection, and Drummer was obviously hurt, but it does show her quality of self, her quality of character. I like the fact that she was able to show up Naomi of well, you underestimated me. Again, that level of respect you were talking about. And yeah, I agree. I think that Ashford knew that Naomi was leaving, or that was her plan. But I don't think he was necessarily trying to stop her. Is just to make sure that she was clear with Drummer and wasn't just going to sneak out. So I think he was very smart in the way that he sort of approached everything, and allowed that final moment to happen respectfully, as opposed to somebody feeling like they were caught or done something wrong or denied. Also, very good, because they definitely need an engineer on the Rossi. I'm just curious how she's going to get there faster than the Martians, if they are all sort of max speeded.
Well, see, that's another very interesting point. And I was saying, like, her returning to the Rocinante is pretty much like that's exactly what they need. They even talked before about, I don't know how to fix it. That's the Naomi thing, and now Naomi's on her way back to them. But as for her getting there before the Martians, my thought on it is that the Rocinante could change course and intercept her. They could sort of work it around so that they are moving towards each other. In that way, they get to them before and now they have no way. The comms are down, so they have no way of knowing whether or not Naomi's on that ship. But even if they don't know she's on that ship, I think they would assume getting caught by the Belters is better than getting caught by the Martians.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
They'll just change the arc and the Mars there. They'll make a quick turn, and they'll have to come up. It'll be all math and trajectories and such, but I'm sure they'll figure that out.
Yeah, Alex will know a way to do it.
That's it.
Cool. Cool. So any final thoughts, Apkin, on this whole Behemoth storyline before we move on?
No, I
No?
think I'm good.
All right, cool. So let's get to the final storyline, which is kind of wasn't not much happened. Checking in with Anna this week, where we find out that all the civilians are being sent back to Earth or to Titan at first to watch what's going on then. But of course, Anna has made this new friend, Tilly Flanagan, who actually we see her in that party flashback with Clarissa Mao, so we know that they're actually she kind of get the impression she knows, like Clarissa recognized her, so you think the reverse might be true as well. But anyway, she hasn't seen Clarissa yet, so that's an interesting one. Anyway, her new friend Tilly, of course, has a way to extort. She likes to call it blackmail, even though it's technically extortion. The first officer, in order to keep her on board, and Anna, of course, says, "Oh, keep me on board too." So she goes out of her way to try to stay on board and be close to the ring. And she talks about how she finds it as a miracle. So yeah, and also they made friends with the other priest, Father Cortez, who they went to this very briefly, but he's actually kind of like a high-profile celebrity, and he owns like a lot of mega churches and stuff. And he was talking about how great it is to be out in the ring, but when Anna's like, "Oh, you can stay," he's like, "No, thank you." So it makes me think that he was kind of just blowing hot air and doesn't really care about staying. So yeah, your thoughts on any of that? Cool. Apkin, you want to?
I was gonna let Darren go. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I kind of yeah. I'm still warming up to this storyline, honestly. Like it's interesting that you guys said that Anna didn't appear in the second book material, because I'm still thrown off by that all of a sudden she's now in this different scenario. And the priest dude, like I don't know. I'm just not buying into the storyline yet, so I don't know.
Really?
I don't know. I'm intrigued by the fact that one lady, I forget what you said her name
Tilly.
was, but Tilly, that makes me think of Star Trek.
Yeah.
That she recognized, or that she would know who Melba was, that we saw her at the party. So that's an interesting little thing there. And I'm interested to see what we'll see where this is going. Like, but to me right now, this is the least interesting storyline on the show. But I'm just waiting for it to kind of pick up a little bit. I'm just not, we were just introduced to, and it's probably good that we were introduced to Anna at the beginning of this season and put into the storyline where I believe you said she wasn't in the books.
Yeah.
Rather than just introducing her in mid-season, I think that would have been very difficult for me. I would have why do I give a crap about this character at all? So I do have some investment in her, and I am interested in seeing where they're going with this, because you do have to have, you get the Mars ship in there, you've got the Belter ship in there, you got to have the UN ship in there. And it's good that we have not only our villain on this ship, but we also have a character that we can relate to on the ship. And so yeah, I don't know, we'll see where this goes.
Yeah, I have to agree. It is, I mean, it would have been more jarring to introduce Anna as just one more new character in this halfway point. So I could see, bringing her in a little bit earlier, even if she didn't technically belong there, gives us a little more time with her. On the other hand, yes, why was she at Earth and now she's out in the ring? It's a miracle. She's intrigued, but it does seem like an odd jump, especially how much she wanted to get home and be with her wife, be with her kid, and all of that. So I totally get where you're coming from right there, Acton. And I think they're just, they're setting things up. Obviously, we had the introduction of Anna and Melba having that little conversation. Here we have another one where we're seeing that Anna is observant and can see there's something going on with Melba, Clarissa. And now that we have Tilly in the picture, who probably could recognize Melba if she was at that party, or at least in that realm. Now we're going to see how eventually Melba Clarissa will possibly be exposed. Is we just have to have these three characters, engaged all at the same point. So I kind of see where they're going with that. But from a larger picture, I loved the priest leaving. I loved how nervous he was. I loved how excited Anna was to like, hey, we can stay. Isn't this the greatest thing? And you could really see that, yeah, exactly. He is in it just for the show. He is in it just for the recognition. He doesn't want to put himself in any actual danger. It was an interesting way, especially like I had said before, in comparison to the Belters, whose whole ship was ready to just go right in. And here it's like, oh, there's danger? Well, I guess we're getting out. And even the technicians were just like, well, if it's triple time, that means someone's going to die. So we're getting off the ship. It's a totally different mindset. And I loved seeing that kind of difference right there. Tilly connecting so quickly onto Anna may have felt a little stretched, but I kind of went with it. I do think this at the moment is kind of the least interesting of all the other storylines going on.
Oh, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, and I do think like the introduction of Tilly into the storyline is a bit more sudden and jarring than the books. I think the books did a better job at doing this personally. But then again, like when I was reading this book, I thought the Anna storyline was the most boring out of all of them. So I think the show's maybe doing a better job of keeping that a bit more interesting. And I do agree with you, Afghan, that it was probably better to introduce her in the first part of the season, because if they tried to introduce her at the same time as everything else, as Melba and all this stuff, it probably would have been too jarring, even though it does almost feel like a different character from when the first half of the season, at least you're already familiar with her and already sort of on board with her, so you can follow her through this thing.
Yeah, and she's still not going home for her wife, and she's still just apologizing. Oh, I'll be home any day. How long before she gets a message like Alex got? We're like, all right, you're done. Like, we're tired of you. like it just seems like
yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think about that.
Doing this over and over again. Eventually, her wife, she's like, all right, whatever, go off in space. I don't care anymore. Because she's just stringing her along and it's like, oh yeah, I miss you, I love you, and then she keeps going off to the next thing. And then, I mean, she could have turned around and gone to Titan, and she wants to go into the ring where she can have no contact with her wife. So, if I were her wife, I'd be like, I'd be getting close to be like, all right, come on now, let's. This is getting old. So I'm just wondering how much longer she can keep doing that.
It's because Ben manipulated her into joining the others so they could find out how to solve the problem with the fertility. Oh,
right. Exactly.
Anyway, I think we can go ahead and end our discussion here, unless you guys had any other thoughts you want to get out before we wrap things up. No, we're good?
No.
Cool.
No. Wait, I want to just address Cardinal Doomsday in the chat. He said, Acton, I could answer about Anna's wife, but spoiler. No spoilers. Like, even saying that is a spoiler. Like, I don't even want to know that there is an answer to that question now.
There is? That surprises me. Oh, I know.
Well, Cardinal Doomsday knows the answer. But,
it's a different dynamic in the book, because in the book she wasn't in the book 2 storyline at the start of the season, so she didn't have that compound of running off to Gillis and saying I have to get back home. So it's a bit of a different dynamic. So they could take it in a different way. So everyone's saying spoiler in the chat, but not necessarily.
Yeah, I think that is one of the difficult points when you're doing those adaptations like that, and you're doing little twists and storylines, is sometimes you blur the motivation or you blur the reasoning because you have to, either stretch things out or compress things up. So, I mean, I kind of get that. That's always a tough choice with an adaptation, and I think they're working it well enough.
Yeah. And Deanna in the chat points out that Anna didn't care much for Tilly in the books, and now this seems like they're best friends. I think that's a result of condensing it, because in the book they go into more detail about how she doesn't really like her, but she ends up hanging out with her a lot. It's a long sort of relationship that they develop, which the show doesn't have time for. It's just speeding through it, so it just jumps straight into them being friends, which I don't mind that aspect of it, but I think her introduction could have been handled a bit better, personally.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Yeah. Let's go ahead and end this discussion here. Just any sort of final thoughts on what? There's only 4 episodes left, and we get a double episode, so there's only 3 weeks left of the Expanse. so any final thoughts on what you hope to see, even if you don't want to get into specific predictions, but any sort of in general terms, like what you hope to see for the rest of the season. Darren, we'll start with you.
Yeah, well, I'm just, I want to at least have a revelation of what this is that's going on in the ring. What is happening in the nucleus? What is this setup? What is it that we're trying to get close to? Yeah, I mean, it's just, I am also curious, and I know I'd asked you privately on this before, and they did a brief flash, I think, in the last episode. There is a piece, I remember there being a piece of the proto-molecule still on the Rossi. When they were cleaning it up at the beginning episode, they showed they had missed this one thing, and we haven't really touched back onto it. And I was wondering if this was one of the reasons that Miller connected on with the ship. Is it like an antenna that they connect to, and that made it more sense than someone else? Is it because Miller was there and he has a connection with the Rossi? Or is it because they were able to sort of observe and get some information on? That's one little thing that's out there that they briefly touched on that I'm hoping gets a little sort of explained. It was in the beginning of the season. I think that they need to have that explained, or at least expounded upon by the end. And then outside of that, just what is going on inside this ring. And honestly, just at some point, I would like them to clear things up with Mars and be sure the Rossi is the Rossi, and Mars is just going to let the ship go. That's the other thing I would really like to happen by the end of the episode. Everything else, I'm golden with.
Yeah, me too. I'm really curious to find out what is in this nucleus. What will they find? What is Holden going to find? What is what exactly are they in? Like, I definitely, if not a flat out explanation by the end of the season, just a lot more information, a lot more a satisfying ending to the season where like we know what it is that they're dealing with there. And even if, and I guess you said earlier, Mark, they're not leaving it on a cliffhanger. So, but I was going to say, even if we were left on a little bit of a cliffhanger, as long as we got some satisfying explanation as to what it is that they're in, what's in this nucleus, what's in the center, that's what I look forward to in this season. And I don't have any like really great speculation as to it, but I'm interested to see what it is, and I hope that we get that by season's end.
Cool. Yeah, great. And for me, I'm just curious to whether or not they're going to go through all book 3 material, and whether or not I think that will feel rushed, and whether or not I'll complain about all the stuff they left out. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Anyway, yeah, thank you guys so much for joining. Thank you everyone in the chat for joining. I got Albert Epstein, Deanna, Belinda said goodbye earlier, and Colonel Doomsday. Thank you guys so much for joining, and everyone watching this in the archives. Thank you so much. I will try to get my review out today, so you hopefully be able to watch that as well. Anyway, just any final shout outs where people can find you, what you're up to. Darren, we'll start with you.
Yeah, you can always catch me over on D's Reviews. I am doing Westworld right now, which I'm sure Acton will tell you is phenomenal and awesome and amazing. Also Legion, which wraps up this week. Just a freaking treat, that show. Also mind-blowing, so really excited about that. Got Preacher coming up this summer. Not a whole lot else going on. You can always catch me on Twitter and Instagram. I'm at Darren Jakes. That's DARRINJAQUES. You guys ever got any questions or curious, just feel free to give me a shout out anytime.
Cool. And my turn, I guess, Mark. Give my little shout out for my channel. I'm Akton Tamko's channel. For those of you who don't know, I am Mark's brother, and we're kind of do a lot of the same things on our channels. But currently, I'm just really focusing on Westworld. I'm doing Westworld reviews every week, so definitely check those out. I'm as Darren said, I'm really into what's going on in Westworld right now. It's a show that's really getting my brain moving. So much going on. I'm really into it. So check out my reviews on that. You can also check out reviews I've done in the past on Star Trek. I've done full reviews on Star Trek Next Generation each season for every single episode. Of course, my Game of Thrones stuff, that's my bread and butter. I recently did a Game of Thrones season 8 predictions video, which is partially sarcastic because I don't think season 8 is going to be all that great. But so all kinds of stuff, if you're not familiar with my channel, that you could check out. So please subscribe and check it out.
Cool. And if you're finding me for the first time, I'm Mark. My channel's Enchantment of Eternity. I do, as I say, these weekly live discussions about The Expanse and also weekly reviews of each episode of The Expanse. And as I said, this week's episode is coming. I also cover other shows like Star Trek. I'm meant to do my Babylon 5 Season 4 review. I'm a bit late. I was supposed to be last week, but as I said, I'm getting a bit clogged up. But hopefully I'll get that out in the next week. And also continuing my mission to cover every Star Trek movie or every movie that has the name Star Trek in the title, which applies to the movie I'll be covering this week, Star Trek 2009, which I've lambasted on my channel over and over again. But I plan on doing something special for this review, so I do recommend. I have something highly planned. I've been planning this for weeks now for this review. I'm going to do something special for you, so check it out as I absolutely roast this total piece of garbage. Anyway, thank you guys so much for joining, and we'll see you next time.